Hello everyone, Fraxon here, and today I'm going to propose to you some new Hearthstone action. Though today, instead of our traditional arena guide episode, I wanted to start a little mini-series regarding Constructed. The main reason for doing this is there's a lot of complaints, and which I do actually share, that Constructed play is, let's say, tends to be a bit repetitive, a bit boring, because the higher rank you go, the more net decking you see. Net decking being, let's say, players that basically copy their decks from a list of standardized decks that are usually used during tournaments. However, this series is also meant to combat that, in the sense that it is actually possible to be creative on your own, to try and use your imagination and end up with an interesting personal deck that can actually get you through the ranks rather quickly. So today I do present to you my creation, the Paladin. The Paladin basically is well, as you can imagine, a Paladin deck, though highly specialized in aggro. So having said this, I'd like to kind of give you an overview of why I picked the various cards and just the general functioning of the deck. So let's start by the basics. So since it's an aggro deck, and I'm not a warlock, and so I can't life tap, my biggest concern was where I'm going to get the card draw. So since the metagame, and the metagame being, in simple words, what, let's say, overall people are playing in ranked play, the meta seems to be relatively slow. I've seen a lot of control decks, so that tend to work in the mid and late game. And having said this, I think the real, let's say, center of this deck in terms of card draw is most certainly Divine Favor. And so the idea is that when you play this deck, I'm not saying it's like Zoo that you wanna, let's say, throw down everything at the same time, but of course keeping too many cards in hand definitely doesn't play well in this deck. So in terms of card draw, Divine Favor is basically the main card engine. However, you can't always hope that there's gonna be Divine Favor when you need it, so you always need to, or at least as a backup, I do tend to bring Jeeves, that has helped me in some matches, although I must say that the game changer is most often than not Divine Favor, except from matchups like Hunter or Warlock Zoo. In that case, it kind of becomes not optimal. I considered Solemn Vigil, which, for those of you that don't know, was a recently introduced card. Draw 2 cards, cost 1 for less for each minion that died this turn. It could work well in this deck, but the problem is that drawing 2 cards just won't make the difference here. I'm looking for pretty big draws, anything from 3 to 5 cards, which is absolutely not impossible considering how much Control Priest and how much Control Warrior there is out there. So, in terms of the nuts and bolts of what, let's say, keeps this all together, I find that having early board presence is pretty much fundamental, and this explains how come I have so many 1-drops. Well, Blessing of Might is fundamental for bursting down the opponent, and it combos perfectly well with Wolf Riders, of which there's 2 copies, and 2 Arcane Golems. 2 Arcane Golems may lift a bit of eyebrows, it's true. You can risk getting your hand clogged up if you have a lot of, let's say, charging minions that give an advantage to your opponent. But I found, all in all, that even though you may give an advantage to your opponent, this deck is fast enough in managing to close the game to, let's say, not be worried too much of the after effects of this. In terms of my 1-drops, the Abusive Sergeant is pretty much like the Dark Iron Dwarf. Its objective is for me to get either favorable trades or to buff up my combo. So to give you an example, I could throw down Arcane Golem, that's 4 damage, Blessing of Might, that's another 3 damage, so we're up to 7, Abusive Sergeant, and we're up to 9. So that's basically 9 damage for pretty much 6 mana, which is, I'd say, really good. And of course, if you have 2 Abusive Sergeants, you see how that's gonna go. That's just like the wombo combo. So Argent Squire, it's good because it has Divine Shield, it was interesting because, of course, since I'm playing the abusive sergeants and also the knife jugglers, they do tend to combo well. And as we're talking about knife juggler, of course, having so many low-cost minions, this can always lead to a lot of effects. Haunted creeper, when it pops, can lead to more knives, which in turn also benefits, which can be benefited from Direwolf Alpha. In terms of silence, I choose to put only one Iron Beak. Although I think that it's entirely possible that you could want to run two, depending on the metagame. Right now, I haven't really seen so many targets worth silencing, and since this is an aggro deck, I mostly want to be silencing taunts, so Belchers, Engine, Shield Masters, or whatever it is. And in terms of weapons, I think Cog Hammer is a really undervalued card, and I think it really works great within this type of deck, because I really need the early board presence, and nothing better than Cog Hammer works out well. I do enjoy the combos of 1-drop, coin, Cog Hammer, and the Cog Hammer in itself, even with open board, can actually represent 6 damage, which is always very good to have. Other cards, Shielded Minibot is always great. For the same reason, Argent Squire fits in perfectly in this deck, because when you get buffs like Direwolf Alpha and Abusive Sergeants, or even the Blessing of Mites, because that doesn't always mean you have to use them when charging minions, I think they tend to clear the board if necessary very efficiently. So my decision to have also 2 Wolf Riders is because we're pushing damage to the extreme. I would nearly tend to say this is basically face Paladin, and you tend to clear the board very rarely, unless it's a necessity, like when maybe you're fighting Zoo Warlock, or in cases where you might get a pesky Hunter, but that's a very weird matchup in which basically if the Hunter manages to get 2 explosive traps, you're pretty much dead. So in terms, instead of my, let's call it late game, Dark Iron Dwarf, I've considered putting 2, but I'm also afraid of slowing down the entire deck. Jesus, as I said before, is basically a little insurance policy against Divine Favor not showing up in your hand. And Loatheb and Avenging Wrath are pretty much my finishers, since a Paladin has very little, let's say, direct damage. Avenging Wrath on an open board can actually do 8 damage, which is pretty good, and could serve as a board clear, because you also have to remember I have forgone taking either an Equality or a Consecration, although it depends. I've tried versions of this also with a Consecration. I've tried it without, like I'm trying it now. And I really haven't seen such the benefit, at least in the current metagame. If I'd see more, more Zoo, if I'd see more Mech Mage, if I saw more Handlock, then I might be considering taking in Equality or other removal. But for now, given the circumstances, I'm definitely not taking any more of these. So. Further variations I had considered. There have been moments where I took out the Argent Squires to play to Avenge, and I also took out and I maybe took out another card, which would have been maybe Ogre Brute to fit in a Mad Scientist, so that you would have the secret combo going on. But all in all, Ogre Brute as a 3-drop or 4/4, especially on an open board, can really make the difference. Or also, it has like a slight catch-up mechanism, because sadly this deck is really bad at playing catch-up. It's a deck that needs to be dominating the board immediately, which once again explains all of my 1-drops. So, having said all these, let's say, interesting facts, I have been ranking actually during these days, and in terms of data, well, I just wanted to show you how, sorry, wrong part. I just wanted to show you that I did reach rank 12, but in terms of data, I achieved, I started from 0, so from rank 25, so I ranked up from rank 25 to 14 in 22 games, and I won 18 of those 22 games, effectively giving me a win ratio of 81%, which is of course unsurprising since we're still at the low ranks, but still it was a very easy way to run up the ladder, and also for me it's been quite a fun deck to play, especially for that, and it also happened to have quite a high win ratio. Things slightly changed in the other few days. I played not too much, just a little, between rank 14 and 12, and I played another 12 games, of which I won 8, leaving me pretty much with a win ratio of around 70, between 68 and 70%. So I think the data is not bad. Actually, in past seasons, I've managed to reach up to rank 6 with this deck, with minor variations, because in past variations, maybe I still have it, I have them saved. I used to also, no, never mind, this was already changed, because once upon a time, I also, when the meta was even slower, I used to run also double Sea Giant. Took off the Avenging Wrath and the Loatheb to play the double Sea Giant, but then Big Game Hunter became very popular, so I avoided it. So this pretty much wraps it up in terms of the presentation for this Paladin. If you're curious about the deck building, if you want to know more, then please continue following this series, and I will be trying to come up with funny and possibly even efficient decks for laddering and for having fun, so that in your Hearthstone experience you don't always need to be net decking to get some results. Having said this, I really do hope you enjoyed the video, so like, subscribe, comment or share, and stay tuned, and I will definitely see you guys next time in the next video.